How's it going, everyone? This is Greg Ferris, the founder of MyoBrain, and this will be an educational piece mostly for our clients, but we'll likely make this live for everyone, going over energy balance. So essentially how fat loss works, kind of going into both sides of the equation from our calories in and our calories out. These are one of those things that a lot of people may think they have a good understanding of, but until they see it visually, it may not click. So of course, these sorts of concepts need to be the foundation for anyone really to be successful with building muscle, losing fat, maintaining that, understanding how all of this works really on a base physiological level. And this will be also inputted into our client course, likely in the fat loss fundamentals. We've actually never done a video like this for a couple of years, so this will be a great way to have an updated version. As always, try to keep it fairly short, under 10 minutes, so let's roll. This first slide here kind of goes over really basically, what has occurred. Say if you've lost weight over the past month or you've gained weight over the past month, what actually occurred during that time frame. So on the far left here, we have weight loss, and in the green is your calories you ingested, and in the blue, the calories you expended. So if you've lost 5 pounds this month, if you knew someone who's lost 5 pounds, what had to have occurred during that time period was they expended more calories than they took in. Okay, that's what had to have occurred. Flip side of that, we have maintenance. Within reason, if you've maintained your weight for a given period of time, you have roughly eaten and expended the same amount of calories. And then the last thing, if you have gained weight, say you gained 20 pounds in 2021, what that means is over a long period of time, maybe not every single day, but over a long period of time, you took in more calories than you expended. So obviously, if we want to reverse any of these patterns, if you're someone who's kind of skinny and you want to put on weight, we have to get closer to here. If you have put on some weight and you want to reduce that weight, we have to get over here. So again, it kind of goes with a visual representation of really, what's occurred there if you've lost weight, gained weight in the past, and then of course what has to occur if we want to revert back, all right? Then let's go into this blue portion here. What actually is in a part of the equation for that calorie expenditure? So there are 4 big components here. We won't go into a ton of detail, but just so you're aware of what makes up, say if this someone expended 2,200 calories in a day, really, how does that 2,200 break down? So roughly 70%, which is obviously a huge chunk of that, is called your basal metabolic rate. And this really is not something that you are in control over. This is all the stuff that's not super sexy. This is your heart beating, your blood pumping, digestion, all of those things. The vast majority of, say, if this person expended 2,200 calories, is going to be from those vital functions, which makes sense. It's more important that our blood moves around our body than it is that we run a really quick 5K. Okay. Then the second biggest component here will be NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or think about just moving your hands, walking up and down steps. Not formal exercise for most people. What I have down there is doing the laundry, walking around the office, etc. That makes up the second biggest chunk. Then we have TEF, which is called the thermic effective food. This is also not something you're really in control over. This is pretty much 10% of whatever you ate during that day. So if you ate 2,000 calories, it roughly takes 200 calories to break that food down. So the more you eat, the higher that gets. The less you eat, the lower that gets, because it's always about 10% of total calories. Then the last chunk here, which may be surprising to some people, is that exercise makes up about 5%. The formal exercise, going to a CrossFit class, doing some back squats, is a small chunk of our overall caloric expenditure for a day. Now, that can differ for people, especially if you work out a ton. If you're someone who is an endurance athlete who works out 3, 4, 5 hours a day, that can be skewed. But for the bulk of people, it is still a very, very small amount of what they're expending day to day. So basal metabolic rate is fixed, thermic effective food is fixed, and then obviously our NEAT, we're in control over that. We're in control if we go for a walk with our dogs or not. And then obviously for exercise, we're in control of how often and how much we're doing there. So again, everything in the blue here, this is the component of this calorie expenditure each day. That's how that is kind of broken down. Then we move into calorie intake. This is probably a lot easier for us to grasp. It's very, very simple. You eat foods. If I eat a bagel, if I eat peanut butter, that has fat, that has carbs, that has protein, or a combination of all of those things. Each one of those grams of macronutrients yields a certain amount of calories. You multiply that up, and that's what's on the food container when you eat a bagel. Really, you don't need to know any of this because a nutrition tracking app does the heavy lifting for you. If you track a bagel, it's going to say it's 200 calories. It's going to go into your nutrition tracking app. The work has been done. But again, when you look at this intake again here of someone who's at maintenance, who's eating 2,200 calories, what does it actually mean? That means they ate a certain amount of fat, a certain amount of carbs, a certain amount of protein. We multiply those numbers by its calorie constituent, and that's how you actually get that target. All right. Now, the third phase here, we have, all right, so what are our options now if someone has maintained their weight for a period of time and they want to see weight loss? So we have our guy over here, Mike, who's eating, let's call this 2,200, and he's also expending roughly 2,200. He really has three options here if he wants to see weight loss over time. He can decrease that calorie intake. It would mostly be from fat or carbohydrates, but mostly he just needs to eat less food. That's obviously option one. No change in exercise. If he doesn't exercise, I would advise him to. He doesn't need to lose weight as long as he eats less, if he keeps his exercise and keeps his NEAT the same. He also can do no change in diet, still eat the same exact things within reason, and exercise a lot more. That's option two here. So if he was working out none, and if he's working out 0 hours a day and taking 4,000 steps a day, and then he takes 7,000 steps a day and goes to CrossFit 3 times a week and no changes to his diet, he should see weight loss. And then option three is obviously what we recommend for people is a combination of those things. And we'll kind of go over that. But of course, option three would be simultaneously eating a little bit less and moving a little bit more. For most everyone, that's going to be the most sustainable way for you to lose fat and maintain it long term. And then we roll into what is the best way to expend more calories. We won't really go into what's the best way to eat less because that's pretty obvious. We just eat fewer calories of whatever you want to eat less of. Pick it, right? But as far as expending calories, what's the best way to do that? Because if we recall, we have two things that are fixed. You can't really increase your BMR within reason, and you can't increase your TEF within reason. So we have NEAT, or sort of lifestyle activity, and then we have formal exercise, putting on your Nikes, going to the gym, getting a sweat on. What you think of as working out. And there really isn't a right or wrong answer here. It really is a personal preference, to be honest, but I'll paint some pictures of what I think would be most applicable in these situations. So I didn't give these people names, but let's see this woman over here in the turquoise shirt. Let's say she only takes 4,000 steps a day. I would call that fairly sedentary as far as lifestyle goes. They're not doing a lot outside of sitting down and exercising. Maybe she does work out, does strength training 4 hours a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. She's an active person. She wears Lululemon. She goes in sweats. She takes Instagram pictures, right? She's doing all those things. For this person, I would classify them as a sedentary individual who has a high exercise output. That's really what they are. They're not really an active person. This isn't a bad thing, but they're not really active. They just work out a lot and then sit down a lot. I find myself in this category quite a bit if I don't make an effort to go on walks and do things like that. So for this individual, it's not mandatory, but obviously we would want them, if their goal is to lose fat, of course, eat fewer calories. But from an exercise standpoint, the low-hanging fruit for her is to increase her step count or more formal cardio. If she's already lifting weights 4 hours a week, she's probably getting the best bang for her buck there with building muscle, with retaining muscle. Going from working out 4 hours a week to 6 hours a week probably won't be doing a ton more. Now, again, if that 2 hours is Stairmaster or elliptical, more just easy cardio stuff, that can be fine. But for her, she'd be a little bit more from a balance perspective and probably just time perspective, an easier time to go on a 20-minute walk once a day to drive up her expenditure because she already has the exercise component fairly stable. And if she does that, that'd be a great way for her to lose fat long term. Then let's say we have this individual over here. It's almost the polar opposite. So she's in this purple hoodie. She's pretty active, right? With 9,000 steps a day. Maybe she works as a nurse, something where she's on her feet a bit more than this individual. But she only works out 2 hours a week doing CrossFit. And if a lot of that with CrossFit's maybe more Olympic weightlifting, it's warming up, it's skill work. So it's not as calorically expensive as, say, running for 2 hours, which you burn a lot of calories with. So for her, I would classify her with an active lifestyle, but relatively low exercise, because she's probably only exercising for an hour or an hour and a half when you take out warming up and things like that in a CrossFit class. 60 or 90 minutes in a week is not a lot of formal activity. So for her to drive up expenditure, it probably makes sense to add more formal exercise because she's already getting a lot of steps in. So maybe she can add in 2 hours of weightlifting. She can add in maybe 2 more days of CrossFit, something to bump up that expenditure. Now, let me get crystal clear. They don't have to do this. They both can just eat less, like this person over here. That's a perfectly fine option if they don't want to or can't choose not to exercise more. If, let's call this girl Sally over here, hates going on walks and hates cardio, she can also lift weights 5 or 6 hours a week. That she can do that. You can burn more calories doing that. Same thing here. If she does not like exercising that much, she only goes to CrossFit to hang out with her friends, she can take 14,000 steps a day and still drive up that expenditure. Those things are totally plausible for people. We kind of talk about individualizing fat loss. We'll go into that. But again, if I met these people, that would be my advice. The person, the turquoise, I would say, you work out plenty. The thing that makes sense for you, the low-hanging fruit, is to bump up your step count or easy cardio. The person, the purple, hey, your lifestyle is great. You don't need to go on any casual walks. If you do, that's a bonus. For you, let's get in the gym a bit more to drive up that expenditure. And I did spell individualizing fat loss incorrectly here. So let me pull this one over here where I did spell it correctly, hopefully. So last slide here, we talk about individualizing fat loss. Very, very quick overview. So number 1, we can reduce calorie intake. Very, very obvious, hopefully at this point. Number 2, we can increase your step count, or what I would call lifestyle expenditure. And number 3, we can get an increase in our formal workouts. I want to make it very crystal clear. Obviously, we're an individualizing coaching service. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but you have to understand these are the variables that change over time for someone to lose fat, build muscle, maintain their weight. When you understand these 3 variables, how I'm eating, how I'm exercising, my lifestyle component, then they can start to shift, right? And in this video here pretty quickly, so we're not getting too long-winded, but you could understand how these things don't just change from person to person, like we saw here, but how this can change within your own individual person. So what I mean by that is there may be times, this is very common, times in your year, in the summer when it's warmer, that you take 9,000 steps a day and you can afford to work out less, or you can afford to eat more because you're moving more, right? And then there may be times where you look like this person over here, where that step count gets lower. If you live in Minnesota and it's snowing in the month of January and you can't get outside that much, you may have to do more cardio in that time. You may have to reduce your calorie intake in that time. So when you understand these variables, calories we're eating over here, extra overall expenditure, and then really just the 2 components of expenditure you're in control over, general movement, formal activity, that's how you really start to manipulate these things. Understand, hey, if you gained 5 pounds, why did that happen? As opposed to just guessing, if you gained 5 pounds, we know it's one of those 3 variables we need to manipulate. So that is the overview. 15 minutes is close to 10 on Energy Balance Explained, our 2022 update. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, thank you again.